This is our section on Zoroastrianism. This might be a religion that many of you have never heard of before. It is a very small religion. There are less than 200,000 Zoroastrians in the world still remaining. However, Zoroastrianism is definitely one of the world's greatest religions. At one point in time, it was probably one of the largest, if not the largest, religion in the world. It is a religion that is rooted in Persian culture. Persia is the region of the Middle East that just borders on India there. It has an ancient history. We're going to talk a little bit about that in this lecture. We're going to talk about the religion that came out of it and why it's so significant to the history of world religions. So right here you will see a common symbol of Zoroastrianism. There's not one single symbol of Zoroastrianism, but this is a commonly used one. You see this man, he's a winged spirit. This is a symbol not only of Zoroastrianism, but also of Persian culture. In the ancient Persian Empire, which we're going to talk about, it was believed that there were a number of spirits that personified certain values. There's spirits of good thought, spirits of wholeness and of purity, and of this and of that. And this is believed to be the Fravashi, who was the spirit of the Persian king's royal authority and glory. So it has both a religious and a political context. For modern Iranians, it is a symbol of their pride in their religion, a symbol of their pride in their culture. Most Iranians are now Muslim, but this is still a common symbol of Persia's history. I've included this quote here from the Gathas, which you may know by now are Zoroastrian scripture. It says, "O Lord of life, we long for thy mighty fire of thought, which is an enduring, blazing flame, bringing clear guidance and joy to the true believer. But as for the destruction-loving, this quickening flame overcomes his evil in a flash." So several important things here going on. First of all, Zoroastrianism may have been the first religion that personified thoughts and virtues in the forms of spirits. Thought, good thought and bad thought are both considered spirits. And all of these different spirits, good and evil, and they are all good or evil, are engaged in this cosmic battle for the sake of good and evil. For Westerners, this was probably going to seem really, familiar to you, especially after studying, Shinto and Buddhism and Taoism and other Eastern religions that kind of shy away or don't really consider the universe to be in a great battle between good and evil. This might start to seem more familiar. And it's believed that Zoroastrianism is perhaps the foundation of this modern idea of a great battle between good and evil. You might also notice that the language and the way the Gathas talk about Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, the supreme God, is not unlike the way Westerners see God spoken of in their scriptures, right? We long for thy mighty fire of thought, which is enduring and blazing, clear guidance, joy to the true believer, right? This is your key right here, the true believer. We haven't seen any Eastern religions that have used language like this. Zoroastrianism does, and that's really significant. So we're going to talk about that today, and we're going to talk about how it developed and the influence that it's had on the West. So we're going to go through some of the history of Persia and Zoroastrianism. We're going to talk about Zarathustra, the great prophet or the great founder of Zoroastrianism and his teachings. We'll talk about the spread of its beliefs, its practices, and how it exists today. It should be noted that today the majority of Zoroastrians live in India, but there's also a significant pocket still in Iran. But outside of those two places, there aren't many Zoroastrians now. So, Zoroastrianism, as I've mentioned, it was founded in ancient Persia, which is now called Iran. A lot of Westerners don't know this, but Persia was in its time, it was the greatest empire the world had ever known. It was the largest empire. It had the largest population of any other empire at that time. They were known for their arts and for their astrology and astronomy, for their metalworking. You can see this beautiful ancient Persian artifact in delicate gold. So really, it was a very important contribution to world history. Zoroastrianism was the official religion of the Persian Empire for over 1,000 years. Even today is closely associated with Iran. And I'm going to use these two words somewhat interchangeably, Iran and Persia. It should be noted that most modern-day Persians or most modern-day Iranians will often call themselves Persian, right? It's not to say that they don't associate with the government or the nation of Iran. It's just that they have a strong connection to their cultural heritage, right? They're very proud of being Persian. Zoroastrianism has been called a bridge between Eastern and Western religions. It was based in Vedic Hinduism, but it had a great influence on Judaism and other Middle Eastern and Western religious philosophies. And we'll see that today. As I mentioned today, it's practiced by anywhere between 124 and 190,000 people. So there's a worry that it's dying out. But modern Zoroastrians we'll hear from them later, are committed to continuing their tradition. Zoroastrianism teaches that the world is in a cosmic battle between Asha, which is the truth, who is personified by Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, and Druj, the lie, which is personified by Angra Mainyu. But really, the truth and the lie, Asha and Druj, were pre-existent before even Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu. Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu picked sides when they discovered truth and lies. Okay, so for Zoroastrians, this idea of truth and falsehood, or good and evil, are kind of what the whole universe is made up of. It's how they define existence. And we see this played out by all of these celestial beings, by God, Ahura Mazda, who's considered the supreme God, by his brother and also opponent, Angra Mainyu, who chose the latter. And it's this large drama that's playing out. Asha is not only the truth. Asha also represents light, life, creation, purity. It's very important within Zoroastrianism. Truth and goodness. Whereas Druj is the complete opposite. It's darkness, it's death, it's destruction, it's impurity, it's lies, it's evil. So it's a very dualistic way of looking at the universe, not just in terms of, where in the East, it's all about balance. In Zoroastrianism, it's about one conquering the other. It's about one being better and one being worse. And they do believe very strongly that Zoroastrians do believe that human beings need to pick a side in this battle, that our actions on Earth contribute to that cosmic battle. And that's something else that's very important about Zoroastrianism, that it another way it influenced the West. So as I mentioned, it's based in Vedic Hinduism, and keep in mind that the Vedas, the first Hindu scriptures, Vedic Hinduism is not exactly the way we know Hinduism today. Vedic Hinduism was Hinduism that worshipped the elements and gods who represented the elements, like Agni, the god of fire, Indra, the god of creation, and various gods of mountains and rivers and water, fire, earth. The elements were very important within Vedic Hinduism. So this is before the rise of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Okay, this is we're talking very, very ancient. Um, the ancient Persians followed a form of Vedic Hinduism. They worshipped the Daivas, or the Devas in Sanskrit, the gods. They worshipped the Devas. They believed in holiness within the elements, including, fire, water, air, earth, but also metals, spirit, so on and so forth. But fire was held to a higher plane, or held to a higher standard. Fire was considered life, or a life source, right? Fire is where life came from. That's really important because later on, Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of Zoroastrianism, becomes associated with fire. We'll see how that is. And it's comparable, and you can see the similarities to the Hindu use of the Havan, right? The sacred fire that through which you can give offerings to Agni, the god of fire. Remember that becomes important in Zoroastrianism. They take this and they kind of do their own thing with it. This idea of a Havan becomes very important. Also, we can kind of see remnants of these sorts of ideas in Jainism. Remember that in Jainism, it's considered violence to put out a fire, right? Because fire has life in it. So these sorts of ideas are present all over that region of the world. Another way we see the ancient Vedas in Zoroastrianism, the term Aryan, talked about the Aryans, a noble people who practice Vedic Hinduism. Well, the term Aryan led to the modern modern day name of Iran. Okay, so whether you're talking about the Iranians or the Persians, you're talking about a very ancient civilization and a people who have a lot of pride in how ancient their civilization is. So this is a map of the world, of the Eastern Hemisphere in 1300 BCE. So that's approximately 3,300 years ago. You see it's quite different than what we know today. No countries, a few empires here and there. The Egyptian Empire was still very prominent at that time. This is before the Greek Empire. This is before the Romans were even a thing. Like, Rome didn't even exist at this time. The Middle East was probably the most powerful place in the world at that time. It was ruled by the Hittites, the Assyrians, the Babylonians. This is where all the power was at that time. But this is also where we see the Indus Valley civilization was coming to an end. We've talked about that before. The Vedic civilization was still thriving. There was no one government covering all of this. It was lots of little, city-states and whatnot. And the Chinese culture was starting to kind of come together a little bit in the form of the Shang civilization. And then there was just lots of tribes and hunter-gatherers and so on and so forth through most of the rest of the world. In the midst of all of this, with India and the Vedas to their east and Babylonia to their west, were the Iranian pastoral peoples, right? Pastoral means that they were nomads. They lived off of herds of animals. They traveled with the herds of animals. They followed Vedic religion, but they had not yet really come together yet under a king or a government. Just give you a sense. So this is modern day India. This is modern day Iran. This is modern day China. Modern day Saudi Arabia, Europe. Just give you a sense. Zarathustra, the great prophet or founder of Zoroastrianism, was born sometime during this time, between 1800 and 1200 BCE. Keep in mind that's a pretty wide swatch of time. That's 600 years. Historians really don't know very much at all about when exactly he was born, where he was born, except that he was in that region, what his situation was. Most of what we have is based upon a religious tradition and based upon the Gathas and other Zoroastrian texts, scriptures. According to tradition, though, Zarathustra was a good and wise man. He disliked the polytheism of the Vedic religion. He had the wisdom to see that in the world there was good and there was evil. And for whatever reason, he was chosen by Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, to bring Ahura Mazda's teachings down to humanity, right? So he had a series of visions in which he was escorted to the very presence of the wise Lord, of the supreme God. He was escorted by one of Ahura Mazda's, one of his asuras, which is one of his lower spirits, who serve Ahura Mazda. And he was taught all about the nature of good and evil from Ahura Mazda and his counterpart, Angra Mainyu. And he returned to the world, and he tried to teach people about good and evil. He tried to teach people about purity, and he was ignored. He was persecuted. He was hated by the Vedic priests, whom he believed were worshiping devils. He believed the devas were actually devils. And it wasn't until the age 42, when he gained the attention of a powerful king, that things started to turn around for him. King had this a horse, a very valuable horse, very fast and strong horse, and it was sick, and no one could heal it. And the king tried everything, and finally he heard about this man, Zarathustra, who was said to be a wise man of some kind, a religious man of some kind. And he brought Zarathustra in, and Zarathustra healed the king's horse. And the king was so impressed that he gained him as one of his first converts. And once he had the king as a convert, the king's court and family followed suit. And this is the beginning of Zoroastrianism. Here you can see an image of the life of Zarathustra. You can see here he is. There is the wise Lord, Ahura Mazda, the sacred fire. We'll talk about the sacred fires more. And these are scenes from Zarathustra's life. It said that there were many miracles and signs that when Zarathustra was born, that he was going to be a great man. He had enemies, though, from the very beginning. People recognized that he might be a threat to the established order and the established religion. So So his enemies tried to kill him as an infant. Many times they tried to burn him. They tried to expose him and let animals, devour him. And he was saved every time miraculously. So it's this sign of the fact that he was going to become great. These are signs. These are scenes from how he gained the attention of the king, and how he developed, or how he taught people about worship of Ahura Mazda through the sacred fires. So this is he also composed the Gathas. The Gathas are the original scriptures within Zoroastrianism, which we only have portions of now, unfortunately. Within the Gathas, he describes the revelation he had of Mazda Ahura. It says, "As the Holy One, I recognized you, Mazda Ahura, when good thought," and good thought, again, is a spirit, good thought came to me and asked me, "Who are you? To whom do you belong? By what sign will you appoint the days for questioning about your possessions and yourself?" Then I said to him, "To the first question, I am Zarathustra, a true foe to the liar, to the utmost of my power, but a powerful support would I be to the righteous, that I might attain the future things of the infinite dominion, which is paradise, as I praise and proclaim you, Mazda. As the Holy One, I recognized you, Mazda Ahura, when the good thought came to me, when the still mind taught me to declare what is best. Let not a man seek again and again to please the liars, for they make all the righteous enemies." So there's a lot going on here. Let's break this down a little bit. So good thought, again, this personification of thought itself comes to him and questions him. Who are you? To whom do you belong? It's really interesting. With Zoroastrianism, we start to get these religions in which you need to not just associate yourself with the religion, but you need to identify with the religion against other religions, even, right? Because the Vedic priests were worshiping the wrong spirits. They're worshiping the wrong things. and that was causing problems, right? To whom do you belong? He says, I'm Zarathustra. I'm a true foe to the liar. And to the utmost of his power, he would support the righteous. So he's allying himself. He's becoming an ally with good against evil. Right? That's the identity within Zoroastrianism. You are on the side of the good against evil. And we'll talk about how that plays out. So that he can attain heaven. You ally yourself with good so that you can attain heaven and be on the side of the righteous. But even before he had this vision, before he ever was in the presence of Ahura Mazda, or Mazda Ahura, he recognized him. He recognized him when the still mind, which is to say, he, by himself, through meditation, realized that there's good and there's evil, there's truth and there's lies. So for Zoroastrians, you don't necessarily need the revelation. You just need to be wise enough to understand that there's good and there's evil in the world. And you need to ally yourself with what is true and what is good, as Zarathustra did. Zarathustra is the model, right? And before he had the revelation, he understood there was good and evil in the world and that he had to ally himself with what is good. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, email me. So Zarathustra taught that there was a basic dualism in the universe. The world was divided between the spiritual and the material, the good and the evil, pure and impure, and even on a less spiritual level, just on the material, mundane ways, the world is still divided between hot and cold, man and woman, day and night. Everything in the universe is divided into two. Now, some of these things relate to good and evil. Hot and cold doesn't relate to good and evil. I want to make that clear. It's not that hot is good and cold is bad. It's only to say that Zarathustra taught that everything in the world was divided. And on the realm of in the level of good and evil, there was this cosmic battle, and it began with these two primal spirits, the two original spirits at the beginning of the world. Now, keep in mind that at the beginning of the universe, even before there were these two spirits, truth and lies, Asha and Druj, already existed. Okay, but these two first spirits recognized it, and they chose sides. It says, now the two primal spirits who revealed themselves in vision as twins are the better and the bad in thought and word and action. So one is good thought, good word, good action. The other is bad thought, bad word, bad action. And between these two, the wise spirit chose aright, and the foolish not so. And when these twain spirits came together in the beginning, they established life and not life. And that at last the worst existence, which is hell, shall be to the followers of the lie, but the best thought, which is paradise, to him that follows right. So whoever follows the lie or participates in evil will gain the worst existence, which we call hell. And those who follow what is righteous will gain the best, which is what we would call paradise. Of these twain spirits, he that followed the lie chose doing the worst things. The holiest spirit chose right. So what's interesting is that we have, for the first time, this development of a good God and a bad. But the bad is not a bad God. The bad becomes subservient to the good. The bad, Angramanyu, is just foolish. He is less powerful. He is arrogant enough to think that he is as powerful as the wise Lord, but he's not. He's subservient by the fact that he chose evil. But unlike in the West, where there was only one God, and the idea of like a devil is something that comes later, in Zoroastrianism, they came together. They were born together. They were twins. But it was just a matter of choice. It all comes down to who you ally yourself. And the same goes for humanity, right? Either you ally yourself with the good and you will gain paradise and you will be on the stronger side, the winning side, or you don't. So that is the basis of Zarathustra's teachings. He composed the sacred verse called the Gathas, which praised Ahura Mazda. They were in prose. They were like poetry. This choice between good and evil, for Zoroastrians, it's not so much about belief and faith. Don't fall into that trap. In Christianity, it's all about belief and faith. And even though we're starting to look at religions that are more similar to something that you might be used to, don't fall into the trap of using the wrong language. This is not about belief and faith for Zoroastrians. This is about allegiance and loyalty. This is about picking a side. And part of picking the side happens in your mind and in terms of believing in what is good. But it's more than just belief. It's more than faith. Faith has more to do with choosing something that you can't necessarily prove, choosing something that you feel, trusting that you will be rewarded, and so on and so forth. For Zoroastrians, it's about the almost commonsensical idea that there's good and evil, that there's truth and lies in the world. Any person can see that. Any person with eyes, Zoroastrian would say, can see that, that there's good and there's evil. And so it's about being wise enough to choose what is right. So it's about aligning yourself, making allegiance and loyalty. Zarathustra also introduced the idea of a set creed, a belief system, like a set belief system. This is what we believe in. Long before the Council of Nicene, not long before the Apostles' Creed and things like that in the West, Zoroastrians had a creed. This is what they believe in. And when a person converted to Zoroastrianism, they had to recite a certain creed as well, which you'll have a chance to read this week. But the basic foundational creed within Zoroastrianism is that on three noble ideas be ever intent: good thought, well thought; good word, well spoken; good deed, well done. If you ever heard this before, right thoughts, right speech, right actions, or sometimes good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Sometimes that's thrown around as an expression or the way to be a good person. That has its roots in Zoroastrianism. It also has a root in Vedic Hinduism. In Vedic Hinduism, they didn't see things being divided between good and evil, right? They saw the world being divided into three parts: the spiritual, the intellectual, and the material. There were three ways that you related to the world. You related to the world on a spiritual plane in the form of worship. You related to the world intellectually by thinking about it. You related to the world physically by working with it. And you see that here, right? Zoroastrianism takes this good and evil, creates this kind of good and evil dichotomy, but it's still pulling from its Vedic roots. You relate to the world with your thoughts, with your words, and with your actions, right? Thoughts are more spiritual. The intellectual is your words, because your words relate your ideas, and then things that you do, the way you relate to the material. So there's still all of these Vedic ideas within Zoroastrianism. We can't ignore that. Zarathustra also introduced this idea of there being a heaven and a hell. If you do good, you go to heaven. If you do evil, you go to hell, and that there's an afterlife, not reincarnation, but an afterlife. And he also preached the idea of an end of the world, and we'll talk about that later. He preached for 50 years, and he was killed. He was assassinated, but he lived a long life, and he managed to turn Zoroastrianism into a major religion. So within Zoroastrianism, there's also this rich spiritual world. It's not just the wise lord and the lord of destruction. There's also all of these minor spirits that each created to help them guard the world, or in the case of Angramayu, destroy the world. Ahura Mazda created the Amesha who are the beneficent immortals. They're like spirits, and they help guard creation. And each one is a personification of a virtue, not of an element, not of a thing, but of a virtue. So there is Amesha for truth, for good thought, for desirable dominion, which is paradise, for devotion and religion, for wholeness, which is related to purity, for immortality, and each of the Amesha Spenta are also associated with one of the elements. Right? So the elements, that elemental part of Vedic Hinduism never leaves Zoroastrianism, and it continues to this day. And these are common pictures, common artwork of the Spentas. You see a couple of them have wings. So this, okay. There are also asuras, which are minor immortals as well. There are a variety of asuras that help guard the world, guard creation. So they're similar to older Vedic gods, and in fact, each one of these has a counterpart within Vedic Hinduism. These are essentially, or historians believe that these are older Vedic gods that have been kind of reinterpreted by Zoroastrianism. Gods associated with each of these elements that add a further have a further element of significance in the forms of truth, dominion, devotion, so on and so forth. So they have their roots in the older Vedic gods, but it's believed that these helped influence the idea of angels within Judeo-Christian and Islamic traditions. So you can kind of see, again, the bridge between East and West. You can see all these religious influences moving from India slowly over into the West. And likewise, there are influences that move from the West over into the East. So far, we've talked about religion in terms of Eastern religions and Western religions, but that's a fallacy. That's simply not true. Religions overlap each other, and they influence one another, and they move, and they change, and so on and so forth. If you get anything out of this lecture on Zoroastrianism, get that it's not a strictly East versus West thing. It's much more complicated than that. So this idea of wings became an important part of the way Westerners visualize angels. That doesn't have its root in Zoroastrianism, though. It has its root in older Babylonian and Assyrian ideas. The Babylonian Assyrian gods had wings, like so. Like so. But the Zoroastrians take them and expand this idea of celestial beings with wings. And Judaism and Christianity take it, and Islam take it a step further. And Gramainu, not to be outdone, he creates his own set of spirits, evil spirits, that try to work against the Amesha Spentas. So each of these yazads, each of these devas, are meant to counteract the work of the Amesha Spentas. So there's disorder, there's bad mind, there's sloth, there's death. It's also called the bone dissolver, which sounds like an awesome Halloween costume idea, if you ask me. There's greed, thirst, and other yazads who are minor demons. So Zoroastrians call these the daivas. Daiva comes from the word deva, which is Sanskrit for God. So the Vedic gods become devils. Devil. Daiva becomes the source of the English word devil. You see how everything's influencing each other? It's pretty interesting. Zoroastrianism spread through the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire became huge, one of the largest empires in history. It also, so it spread that way. It spread through respect of the Magi. The Magi were a tradition of priests within Zoroastrianism who were descendants of Zarathustra. They were very well respected. The Magi were known as far west as in Rome and Greece. And in the Christian story of the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, he is visited by Magi who recognize his importance, gives him a little added kind of authority. And also spread in the form of influencing Judaism. When the Persian Empire conquered the Babylonian Empire, the Babylonian Empire included Israel at that time, and the Hebrews, who we also know as the Jews. So the Persians conquered the Babylonians. The Hebrews lived in the Persian Empire. They interacted with Zoroastrians, and it's believed that that's how Judaism got some of its ideas of the devil as we see in the book of Job, if you're familiar with the Hebrew Bible at all. The idea of the devil, the idea of angels might have been an influence from Zoroastrianism. Was definitely an influence, but how much we don't know. And it indirectly influenced Christianity and Islam as well in that way. This is a priest right here, a modern day priest. They call themselves Magi's, as I mentioned. They wear these veils over their faces because they don't want to pollute the sacred fires that they're working with, right? So this is how big the Persian Empire got. Just to give you an idea, this is Greece, this is India, this is Egypt. It was the largest empire that had ever been seen up to that point. It was the largest empire until Alexander the Great came through and conquered even more. But should be noted that at this time, the world's population, the entire world population, was probably only less than 200 million people in the whole world. As much as 44% of the world's population lived here in the Persian Empire. Almost half of the world lived in the Persian Empire. That's how influential it was. And that's how big Zoroastrianism got. It should be noted that if you were a member of the Persian Empire, you weren't required to be a Zoroastrian, but the king was a Zoroastrian. All the rulers were Zoroastrians, so it made sense to ally yourself with that religion. So a lot of people did convert at that time. So what happened? How did Zoroastrianism, shrink and slowly go away? Well, first the Greeks under Alexander conquered Persia. When they conquered the capitals of the various capitals of Persia, they went after Zoroastrian temples and priests and texts with extreme discrimination. They killed many, many priests. They burnt several important texts. There weren't many. Most of Zoroastrian tradition was oral at the time. It was spoken. There were very few texts to begin with, and so that's how we lost the Gathas. That's how we lost most of the Gathas. To this day, we only have bits and pieces of them, and that's why we know so little of the life of Zarathustra, because a lot of that was lost. The fact that and a lot of the oral traditions were lost as well, because a lot of the oral traditions were known only by the priests. They were memorized by the priests. So when the priests were killed, so much of Zoroastrianism was lost. The Parthians, which was another Persian empire, another dynasty of Persians, managed to reassemble the Avesta, which is a reassembling of the holy texts of what was left of the oral and written traditions. They put them together somewhere between 500 and 224 BCE, and that includes what we have of the Gathas. But again, it's very incomplete. In the 9th century CE, the Pahlavi texts expanded the teachings of Zoroastrianism. So in the 9th century CE, we see a reformation of Zoroastrianism and adding new teachings and new practices and things like that. And so it's believed that Zoroastrianism kind of went through 3 major eras: the original era, the second era, in which they were scrambling to hold together what they had left of the tradition, and then the reformation of it, when a lot of new stuff was added to Zoroastrianism. So the modern Zoroastrianism is without a doubt very, very different than ancient Zoroastrianism. We've talked a little bit about how it's a bridge between East and West. I just want to say a couple more things about it. Some of the main ways it is a bridge between East and West, the links that it has between Hinduism and Buddhism, and then Judaism, Christianity, Islam, ethics, the importance of ethics within Zoroastrianism, the importance of doing certain things to be a good person, which is what we think of as religion in the West. Eschatology, which means the end times. Zoroastrianism introduced this idea of there being end times, when the world would come to an end, and whatever deeds you had done, good or bad, would be kind of counted up for you or against you. The end times, they believed, would be ushered in. Later Zoroastrians, this is not part of the original tradition. This kind of came later. The end times they believed would be ushered in by Saoshant. I'm sorry, I'm saying that wrong. Who will be the final descendant of Zarathustra, right? So again, this idea of this final figure coming to usher in the end times, almost messianic in a way, isn't it? This idea of there being not just being one God, but God having an opponent who is the personification of evil, right? That was a major influence on Western religion. Good and evil, and also, good and evil having minor spirits working on their side. And also, not just there being good and evil, but this idea that the human beings work on behalf of righteousness through their deeds. By being a good person, you are helping with the cosmic battle of good versus evil, right? It's an important contribution Zoroastrianism had to world religion. This is a modern piece of Zoroastrian art. I think it's really interesting. I want to include it. It's Farohar, who again is the symbol of Zoroastrianism, of both its religious and political influence it had in the ancient world. Nowadays, modern Zoroastrians think of this not as a king, but as a guardian spirit of Zoroastrianism as a whole. It includes as both English and Persian inscription of good thoughts, good words, good deeds, and it has Roman numerals which represent the 10 Commandments. So Zoroastrianism really recognizes itself as a contributor to world religion. Even if most people in the world don't know what Zoroastrianism is, Zoroastrians recognize that they have had a huge impact on world religions and world philosophy. So we're just going to look at a couple practices. Zoroastrians' practice focuses on purity and good and evil and purity. Right? So the main practices that Zoroastrians do are in their daily lives through good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. That's the main practice of Zoroastrians. But they have several rituals as well. There's the Daina, which consists of the good and holy path, which, as I mentioned, thoughts, words, and deeds. There's the Sudra, which is this white muslin undergarment that Zoroastrians wear, and the kusti, which is this string that they wrap around their midsection. So what does this mean? The sudra is white, and it's kept perfectly clean, because impurity carries evil with it. Impurity carries sickness and it carries death, and those are definitely on the side of Angra Mainyu. So it's very important for Zoroastrians to keep their lives very clean, both physically and spiritually. So they wear this white garment that represents their purity. This white garment also has a little pocket in the front, and it is to remind Zoroastrians on a daily basis that they're gathering up their good deeds. Whenever they look down and they see that little pocket, it's supposed to remind them, what good deeds have I gathered today? Good things have I gathered today. Besides the sudra, they also have this kusti. The kusti, you'll remember in Vedic Hinduism, young men were given this string when they began their education, their religious education, that reminded them of their religious duties. Well, Zoroastrians have a string as well. It's given both to men and to women. You can see a priest here teaching a little girl how to use it, right? It's an important thing the day you get your string and you learn your kusti and you learn how to do it. You wrap it 3 times around your midsection to represent good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. And you tie it into 2 knots, which represents your commitment to the good path. And Zoroastrians do this while reciting prayers, and they do it 5 times a day. 5 times a day, they take it off and they put it back on, and they recite these prayers, and they take the string off, not the garment. They take the string off and they rewrap it, and it also represents just this preparation. They're girding themselves. They're preparing themselves for battle and for work. It's a really important part of Zoroastrian practice. It should also be noticed that Daina is related to the Sanskrit word for meditation, and is also loosely related to the word dharma. Dharma. So purification again. Zoroastrians are forbidden from polluting any bodies of water. Part of their daily prayers when they take off the kusti and put it back on is to dip their fingers in water and put it to their eyes, not just to purify themselves, but to venerate the water itself. Because again, water has a spirit, right? And so you're venerating the water. Water is in it. They don't bless the water because water is in and of itself already pure. They use water to purify themselves. It's different than in the West where we think you get water and then you bless it and you make it sacred. In Zoroastrianism, water is already sacred. So these are some Zoroastrians praying by the sea. This is a Zoroastrian woman who's going through her wedding ceremony, and the first thing that happens for a woman, and a Zoroastrian woman when she gets married, is that her mother or her mother-in-law sprinkles water over her to purify her. So again, purification is very important. It's associated with good. It's associated with life. Fire temples are their place of worship. In olden times, they'd kind of have these open houses where they'd keep, where the priests would tend these fires. The priest's job is not to give sermons or anything like that. The priest's job is to not allow the fire to go out, right? So there are fires like there's one particular fire temple in Iran that has a fire that's been burning for 1,500 years. It's never been allowed to go out. This is really important because this fire, remember the haven? Remember we talked about the haven within Vedic Hinduism, right? And how Ahura Mazda is associated with fire. We saw that in many of the Gathas, right? He's associated with fire. His fire destroys evil, destroys impurity. So they have these holy fires through which you give offerings to Ahura Mazda and are in some ways representations of Ahura Mazda. You never see pictures of Ahura Mazda. Like in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, you never have a picture of God. But you do have these fires which are holy and represent them. Now, where the fire is, this inner sanctum of the fire temple, only the priests can go there. The wider temple, though outside, any Zoroastrian can come in and give offerings. Usually they burn sandalwood. They burn dry sandalwood, which smells very nice, as offerings, and they pray. They pray to Ahura Mazda. You can see a number of Zoroastrians here. I believe these are Iranian Zoroastrians. As I mentioned, only they can enter the temples. So that, and like in the East, you can go to the temple at any time. Many people like to go in the morning, like housewives will go in the morning and so on and so forth, but there's no particular days when you have to go. Okay, it's more like it's a little bit more like the East in that sense. So this is a modern temple. You see it has the purified, or the pure water, the water here for purification. And as I mentioned, this is what ancient fire temples looked like. They were just open. Yeah. The other interesting part of Zoroastrianism are the towers of silence. So when you have a dead body, dead bodies are like the most impure of impure things. It's believed that as soon as a person dies, as soon as any body, any creature dies, immediately a demon of death enters the body because the spirit is left, and the body becomes extremely impure. You have to be very careful with the handling of deceased bodies, right? They can't be buried in the earth because that would pollute the earth. They can't be burnt the way Hindus do because that would pollute fire. And fire is the most sacred of all the elements. Fire is life itself. You can't throw dead bodies into life, right? And you definitely can't throw it into water because that would pollute water. So what they do is they create these towers of silence. You can see them here. Bodies are put out and they're consumed by vultures and other animals that consume carcasses. They're put on the highest points that Zoroastrians can reach to keep it as far away from everything else, to keep it from contaminating everything else. You can see here all of these vultures are waiting for these people to bring this body out. As I mentioned, the way they handle the body is a very specific way. And this is actually something that they do in Tibetan Buddhism as well. They allow the deceased to be consumed by animals. And considering how close Tibet is to Iran, I have to think that there's some relation there, though I don't know what it is. I don't know what the connection there is, but there is a precedent in that region of the world for disposing of the deceased in this way. And only Zoroastrians are allowed to enter the Tower of the Dead, and only a few people, special people, are allowed to bring the body up, and afterwards they have to go through purification rites. Most famous Tower of Silence is in India. It's in Mumbai, but there are many ancient ones as well. From when Zoroastrianism was a common religion, most of them are unused now. They've fallen into ruin, but the most famous one is in Mumbai. But this has become a major problem in India. The vultures are slowly going extinct for reasons we're not quite sure. That's probably related to environmental things. They eat deceased bodies, and bodies are now of animals and so on, and animals and people, and most of those are now filled with different chemicals and things like that from the lifestyles that we lead and the food that we eat. So it's slowly killing the vultures, and it's become a major problem, a major dilemma within Zoroastrianism. How to properly dispose of of the deceased as quickly as possible when there are no vultures left. So today you're going to look at a video of some Zoroastrians who live in India and some of the challenges that they face. We talked a little bit about how two major populations of Zoroastrians are in Iran and in India. They are a very proud people. They are committed to continuing their tradition. That's becoming more and more difficult because in Zoroastrianism, you're not allowed to convert to Zoroastrianism. You have to be born Zoroastrian. So Zoroastrians have left the religion over time. They've been converted by both Muslims and Christians. And over time, they're just the population is slowly just shrinking. But there is a lot of talk within Zoroastrian communities as to how they can deal with this, and as I say, they are committed to a resurgence of their religion. They're not content to see it go away. You'll see that in the video. So watch the video and then answer this question: what challenges do modern Zoroastrians face? The second lesson on Zoroastrianism is going to be a series of readings and discussion around it. So look for that online. Email me with any questions.